The rain hadn't stopped for hours when Daniel Mercer turned the key in the rusted front door of their new home. The house loomed at the edge of Wrenmoor Hill, cloaked in fog and surrounded by dying trees that creaked in the wind like they had voices of their own. His wife Elena stepped in after him, holding their youngest, Nora, while their teenage son Ben trailed behind with an armful of boxes and a scowl that had barely lifted since they left their apartment in the city. The house was old, centuries old. It had sat empty for years, according to the real estate agent. "A gem," she'd said. "Just needs a little care." But Daniel had noticed she didn't stay long during the walkthrough. None of the agents did. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and something else. Something sour and metallic like rust and rot. The floor groaned under their feet. A grand staircase curved up toward the second floor, and dark wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. The rooms were large but cold, no matter how high Daniel turned the thermostat. By nightfall, they were mostly unpacked. The storm outside had grown worse. Thunder cracked overhead, rattling the windows in their frames. As the family settled into their new rooms, Daniel felt a strange unease settle in his chest, as if the house was watching them, listening. At around midnight, Daniel woke to a soft tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed from the hallway outside their bedroom. He got up, crept to the door, and opened it slowly. Nothing. Just darkness. He turned on the hall light. The bulb flickered once, twice, then blew out completely, shrouding the corridor in deep, black silence. He called softly down the hall, "Ben!" No answer. Only the wind howling through the cracks in the old windows. Daniel shut the door and returned to bed. But he didn't sleep. He kept thinking about the odd patterns in the wallpaper, how they seemed to twist in shapes too deliberate to be accidental. Shapes like eyes. And on the wall above the headboard, in the reflection of the mirror, he thought he saw movement, a flicker of something tall and thin. But when he turned to look, it was gone. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the clouds still hung low and gray over Wrenmoor Hill. The house felt colder than it had the day before, and the silence inside was oppressive, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Daniel made coffee in the dusty kitchen while Elena fed Nora in the dining room. Ben sat across the table, hunched over his phone, clearly still sulking. Then he paused and looked up slowly. "Did someone go into my room last night?" he asked. Elena glanced at him. "Why would we?" Ben hesitated. "Because someone was standing at the foot of my bed. I thought it was Dad, but they were taller, and they didn't say anything." Daniel exchanged a glance with Elena. "You were probably dreaming," he offered carefully. Ben shook his head. "No, I was awake. I had my phone. I turned the flashlight on, but they were gone. Just gone." That afternoon, Elena was unpacking boxes in the upstairs hallway when she heard something behind the wall. A soft scratching. Faint, but rhythmic. She pressed her ear to the wallpaper. It stopped. Then she heard a voice, whispering. It was too low to understand the words, but it was there, just beyond the plaster. She jumped back. "Daniel," she called down the stairs. "Can you come up here?" When he arrived, the noise had stopped. She told him what she heard, but he just rubbed the back of his neck. "This place is probably full of mice." "That wasn't mice," she said firmly. "It was speaking." Daniel checked the walls, knocked on the wood panels. Everything seemed solid. But later, as he walked down the hallway alone, he passed a small door he hadn't noticed before. Shorter than normal, barely waist-high, built into the wall behind a coat rack. There was no handle, no hinges, only a keyhole, and something faintly wet on the floor in front of it. He bent down and touched it. It was blood, fresh. Daniel stared at the smear of blood on his fingertips, frozen in place. The liquid was sticky, unmistakable. He wiped it on his jeans and backed away from the strange door, heart thudding hard in his chest. He hadn't told Elena or Ben about it yet. Something about that door, it made him feel like he shouldn't, like it was watching him, waiting. That night, while the rest of the family slept, Daniel returned to the hallway with a flashlight. The keyhole in the tiny door gleamed in the beam, as if inviting him to peer inside. But he didn't. Instead, he taped a piece of cardboard over the door and pushed the coat rack tightly in front of it. The next morning it was gone. Not the door. The cardboard. Ripped away. The coat rack had been moved back. Neatly. Like someone had taken great care to access the hidden door without making a sound. Daniel didn't say anything. Not yet. Downstairs, Ben was quiet over breakfast. Too quiet. His eyes were dark-ringed and restless. "I heard it again," he said without prompting. "The whispering. It was in my closet this time. Then it stopped. Then something knocked." Daniel's coffee went cold in his hands. Elena tried to reassure him, though her voice wavered. "New house noises, sweetie. We're just not used to it yet." But that afternoon, while cleaning Nora's room, she found something horrifying. There were small handprints on the inside of the window. Tiny, child-sized prints, pressed hard into the glass from the inside. But no one had touched the window. No one had even opened it yet. That night, the lights in the house began to flicker more often. Doors slammed upstairs while no one was there. Ben refused to sleep alone, moving his mattress into the master bedroom. And just after midnight, Daniel woke to the sound of the doorknob rattling. He sat up, heart racing, staring at the bedroom door. It stopped. Then, from just outside in the hallway, came the faint, unmistakable sound of a child laughing. Only, Nora was asleep in her crib. The next day was unnaturally quiet. No storms, no flickering lights, no whispering. Just silence. Too much silence. Daniel checked the door with the keyhole again. This time, there was something else on the floor. Scratches. Long, thin gouges in the old wooden planks, as if fingernails or claws, had scraped their way out from beneath the door. He covered them with a rug. Later that evening, Elena was giving Nora a bath when the baby started crying loud, high-pitched shrieks like she was in pain. Elena rushed to grab a towel, but when she turned back, her heart nearly stopped. The bathwater had gone black. Thick, inky darkness swirled around Nora, who was now gasping and flailing. Elena plunged her arms into the water, but it was clear, perfectly clear. She yanked Nora out anyway, holding the child close, her hands shaking. That night, Ben screamed. Daniel and Elena raced to his makeshift bed in the master bedroom. He was curled in a ball, sobbing, pointing toward the ceiling. "It was on the ceiling," he cried, crawling fast. "It was all black, with long fingers." Daniel swept the flashlight over the plaster. Nothing. But when he turned it off again, he saw something out of the corner of his eye. A quick movement across the ceiling. Gone before he could register it. They all slept in the same room that night. Nobody spoke much. Nobody wanted to. Around 2 a.m. the house seemed to breathe. The walls creaked and shifted with a rhythm, like something enormous was moving inside them. Then they all heard it at once. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy footsteps, coming from the attic. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and crept out of the room, trying to act brave for his family. The old pull-down attic ladder groaned as he opened it. Dust and cold air poured down like a sigh from above. He climbed. Halfway up, the light flickered out. He froze. Above him, in the attic darkness, something whispered, "Daniel." Daniel held his breath. The attic above him was pitch black. The weak light from the hallway below barely reached the top of the stairs. And yet, something moved up there. He couldn't see it, but he felt it. It was waiting. "Daniel." The whisper came again, closer this time, as if it had slipped right to the edge of the opening. He descended the ladder, slowly, every muscle tense. He didn't speak, didn't make a sound. Once his feet hit the floor, he shoved the ladder back up and slammed the panel shut. Back in the bedroom, Elena clutched Nora, and Ben was sitting up wide-eyed. "Something's up there," Daniel said quietly. "No one goes near the attic." He didn't tell them about the whisper, or that it had said his name. The next day, Daniel called a locksmith. He was determined to get the small door in the hallway open and end the mystery. The man arrived in the afternoon and examined the keyhole. "This isn't a normal lock," he muttered. Looks handmade. Old. Real old. He worked in silence for 20 minutes. Then, with a sudden click, the lock gave way. The door swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel, no more than 3 feet high, leading deep into the wall, disappearing into darkness. The locksmith turned to Daniel, pale and sweating. I don't do crawl spaces, he said, grabbing his tools. And I'd recommend you don't either. He was gone within minutes. Daniel shined a flashlight into the tunnel. The walls were lined with rotting wood, and the floor was coated in dust, except for a trail of handprints. Small, child-sized, dragging forward, deeper into the passage. That night, things got worse. Ben was in the bathroom brushing his teeth when the mirror fogged up completely, though the air was cold. A handprint slowly appeared in the steam. Then another. Then words began to etch themselves into the condensation. You're mine now. He screamed so loud Daniel nearly broke the door getting in. But when they entered, the mirror was clean, dry. Only Ben's toothbrush lay on the floor, snapped in half. Daniel barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the tunnel. Those handprints. The whisper. He dreamed of crawling through the narrow dark space. Something following him on all fours, breathing down his neck. When morning came, he looked worse than Ben. Elena had spent most of the night comforting Nora, who wouldn't stop crying. The baby clutched at her mother's shirt and screamed any time she was left alone, even for a second. And worst of all, she kept looking toward the same empty corner of the room, like something was there. After breakfast, Daniel went back to the hallway. The little door stood open. The air around it felt wrong, too cold, too heavy, like walking into a room filled with invisible smoke. But something had changed. Where there had once been a blank wall at the end of the tunnel, now there was a hole, a jagged one. Something had broken through. He stared inside. It dropped into what looked like a void, an open space, a room beneath the house that shouldn't exist. He called out, "Hello!" His voice echoed oddly, like it was swallowed and twisted. Then a sound came back. Not an echo, a reply. A low, rattling growl, wet and hollow, not human. Something was down there. He slammed the little door shut and jammed a chair in front of it. That evening, Elena found long scratches along Nora's crib. Deep gouges in the wood, too high for the baby to have made. As if something had reached in. Then came the smell. First it was faint, like mold, then stronger. A sour stench that drifted from the vents, thick and choking, like rotting meat and stagnant water, filled every room. That night they sealed every door, every window. They had decided to leave the next morning. Pack up, take what they could, and get out. But at 3:13 a.m., the front door swung open, on its own. The wind didn't blow. No one was near it. Just the door, creaking open into the night. And just beyond it, in the darkness outside, Daniel saw a figure. Tall, twisted, its limbs too long, head tilted at an unnatural angle. It smiled. Daniel slammed the front door shut and threw the deadbolt. His hands were trembling, cold sweat sliding down his spine. He didn't say what he saw. How could he? That thing had no face, just a gaping grin carved across pale, sagging skin, and its eyes empty like black glass, watching. By morning they were packed. Daniel didn't care about the boxes, the clothes, the furniture. He just wanted his family safe. They loaded Nora into her car seat while Ben sat in the back, pale and silent. But when Daniel turned the key in the ignition, nothing. The car wouldn't start. He tried again, and again. Then all the doors locked. Automatically. Daniel turned to Elena. "Don't panic," he said. Then the radio came on. Full volume. Screeching static. But beneath the white noise, a voice whispered, "You live here now." The car suddenly unlocked. They scrambled out, dragging Nora and Ben back inside the house. As soon as they were through the door, it slammed shut behind them, on its own, and all the windows in the living room cracked at once, splintering like spiderwebs. The house had decided. They weren't leaving. That evening, every mirror in the house warped. Faces didn't reflect properly anymore. Daniel stood in the bathroom, staring at himself. Only his reflection didn't move with him. He smiled when he didn't. Behind him in the mirror, shadows flickered, figures moving just out of reach. Later, Elena tried calling the police. Her phone worked. The call went through. But when someone picked up, it wasn't a dispatcher. A woman's voice, raspy and distant, whispered, "He was the first. You'll be next." The line went dead. That night, something banged in the attic. Over and over, pacing, scratching, then silence, until the soft creak of the attic ladder dropping down on its own. They stayed huddled in the master bedroom, all four of them. And at 3:13 a.m., Ben whispered, "Do you hear it?" Daniel listened. From under the bed, something was breathing. Slow, wet, getting closer. And then came the voice, low and smiling. "You're finally home." Daniel leapt from the bed and pulled Ben into his arms while Elena clutched Nora tighter. The breathing continued, slow and rhythmic, directly beneath them. The floorboards pulsed with each exhale, like the house itself had a heartbeat. Then came the scratching. Not from the attic. From beneath the bed. Daniel dropped to his knees, heart pounding, and lifted the bed skirt. Empty. But the wood below was buckling. Something was moving just under the floor, slithering between beams. The boards warped with every twitch of its body. He grabbed a chair and slammed it down on the floor. Crack. One of the planks snapped, and from the thin crack, a foul black sludge oozed up, reeking of decay. The slime writhed, as though alive. Ben screamed and pointed. "It's in the walls. I saw it. It crawled past my window. It was looking at me." Daniel ran to the hall, but what he saw made him freeze. The wallpaper was peeling away, revealing more than old plaster. There were faces beneath it, dozens, screaming, pressed into the wall as though they'd been swallowed by it. Their mouths stretched wide, eyes hollowed out. Some looked centuries old. One was fresh, a woman, mouth open in a silent scream, her skin torn and bleeding. Elena backed away in horror as the hallway floor cracked under her feet, revealing a hollow space beneath. Something pale shifted in the darkness below, a writhing mass of limbs and teeth. Suddenly, the lights went out. Total darkness. Then the hallway lit up in red emergency glow, dim and pulsing, like an alarm system powered by something alive. A deep, distorted voice whispered through every vent in the house. "You belong to the hollow." From upstairs came the sound of footsteps. Fast, heavy, running. Then a door slammed open. And another. And another. All upstairs doors flung wide, as if something was searching the rooms. Coming closer. Elena screamed. Daniel grabbed her hand. Into the basement. Now. They ran. Down the creaking stairs. But when they reached the basement door, it was already open. The light inside flickered weakly, and at the bottom of the stairs, barely visible in the gloom, stood a little girl. Her dress was torn, her head tilted, her face blank, and from her mouth, in a voice far too deep, she spoke. "You can't hide where it was born." Daniel froze at the top of the basement stairs. The little girl stood still. Her eyes were completely black, voids that swallowed the light. Her neck twitched with slow, unnatural jerks as if something was wearing her body like clothing. She stared up at them in silence. Then, with a grotesque cracking sound, her mouth stretched open far too wide, and she screamed. But it wasn't a scream of pain or fear. It was a calling, a deep, guttural howl that echoed through the bones of the house. The walls groaned in response. Daniel slammed the basement door shut and locked it. Elena was crying now, clutching Nora, whose tiny body trembled with each shriek from below. Ben was staring blankly at the floor, lips moving silently, whispering something. Daniel grabbed his son's face. "Ben, look at me. What are you saying?" Ben blinked, then whispered, "It's hungry again." The lights flickered. Then, for the first time, they saw the stairs breathing. The wooden steps rose and fell ever so slightly, like a chest inhaling and exhaling. The wallpaper twitched. The floor pulsed under their feet. The house was alive. That night they didn't sleep. At 3:13 a.m. Always that same cursed time. Every door in the house slammed open at once. Wind howled from the fireplace, though there was no fire. Shadows raced across the ceiling like insects fleeing from light. A deep humming sound filled the air, vibrating through the walls. Then the family portrait, hanging over the mantel, began to bleed. Thick red trails poured from the painted eyes, dripping onto the floor. And worse, the faces in the painting had changed. They weren't smiling anymore. Ben's eyes were gone. Elena's mouth was stitched shut. Daniel's face was split wide open down the middle like a broken mask. Nora's crib began to rock on its own upstairs. But they had left her with them. All four of them were in the room together. Still, the creaking of the crib grew louder. Daniel climbed the stairs, shaking, and entered the nursery. The crib was empty. On the floor were tiny wet footprints. Leading toward the crawlspace door. It stood wide open. Daniel's heart dropped. "She's gone, Nora's gone," he shouted, his voice breaking as he fell to his knees at the mouth of the crawlspace tunnel. Elena screamed behind him, rushing forward, grabbing his shoulders. "She was just with us. I was holding her." But she wasn't anymore. The baby had vanished. No sound, no cry, just those tiny, wet footprints leading into the tunnel. Daniel grabbed the flashlight with shaking hands and aimed it down the passage. The beam wavered over rotting boards, ratty cobwebs, and black handprints smeared along the walls. Then, faintly, he heard her, Nora's cry. But it was wrong. Distorted, echoing, like it was coming from somewhere deep and far and underwater. Without a word, Daniel dropped to his knees and crawled into the tunnel. "Daniel, no!" Elena tried to pull him back, but he was already swallowed by the dark. Inside, the air was suffocating, heavy with the scent of soil and rot. The tunnel grew tighter, the walls pressing close, pulsing, alive. The handprints got fresher. Some of them moved as he passed. Nora's cry led him deeper, until the tunnel suddenly dropped open. Daniel fell. He landed hard in a massive underground chamber, far larger than the house above should allow. It was circular, with stone walls covered in symbols carved in blood. In the center stood an altar made of bones and rotting wood. And on top of it, Nora. She lay still, eyes wide, staring at something above. Daniel ran for her, but something stopped him mid-step. A shadow rose from the walls. It had no shape, no eyes, no face. Just a massive, shifting blackness. Limbs formed and twisted and disappeared again. A mouth opened without lips, and from it came a voice that echoed in Daniel's skull. "You brought her to me." "No!" Daniel screamed. "Take me instead." The shadow paused. Then it laughed. Not a sound, but a vibration, low and cruel, filling the air like thunder under the earth. "You were always mine, but she is new." Suddenly the ground cracked. The altar began to sink, bones twisting and pulling Nora down. Daniel ran forward and leapt onto the structure, grabbing his daughter just as the bones tried to close around her. He held on. He screamed, and the walls began to collapse. Daniel held Nora tight against his chest as the bone altar shuddered beneath him. The skeletal structure was collapsing inward like a ribcage crushing itself. Snapping, moaning, alive. The shadow creature hissed, its voice seeping into his mind. "She was promised. You all were." The underground chamber shook violently. Cracks split the walls, and a thick, oily black liquid began to ooze from the symbols, dripping like blood from ancient wounds. The air became chokingly thick, heavy with screams. Not just one, but hundreds, echoing from within the stone. Daniel staggered backward, shielding Nora, eyes wide with horror. And then he saw them, the others. Figures, dozens of them, trapped in the walls, their bodies twisted into the stone, faces frozen in agony. Some were modern, wearing flannel, jeans, glasses. Others were ancient, dressed in rags, hands stretched toward freedom that never came. All alive, all watching. And among them, Daniel saw his own reflection. In the far wall, a distorted image of himself was already embedded. as if his fate was sealed. Then a scream rang out above. "Daniel! Elena!" From the tunnel, she and Ben appeared, crawling in. Elena's eyes locked on the shadow, and she screamed. Not in fear, but rage. Ben held something in his hand. An old iron cross he'd found in the nursery days ago, under the floorboards. A child's toy, or so they thought. The moment he raised it, the shadow recoiled, hissing like steam against metal. Ben stepped forward, voice shaking. "Let her go." The entity screamed, a deafening shriek that split the stone. The chamber walls began to cave in, pieces of the ceiling crashing around them. Daniel took his chance. He ran, clutching Nora, toward Elena and Ben as the altar shattered behind him. The shadow lunged, but the cross in Ben's hand flared with a blinding white light. The creature howled and vanished into the dark, dragged screaming into the cracks in the earth. The three of them, Daniel, Elena, and Ben, scrambled through the collapsing tunnel. Stones rained down behind them. The path twisted unnaturally, longer than it should have been. They emerged, gasping, into the hallway upstairs. The crawlspace door slammed shut behind them. The house fell silent. Then, all at once, every light turned off, and from somewhere deep in the house, something whispered, "You think it's over?" The lights never came back on. Not fully. Every bulb in the house now pulsed with a dim, sickly red glow, like a heartbeat, slow and menacing. The walls no longer stood still. They breathed, faintly expanding and contracting, as if the entire structure had become a living, seething organism. Daniel, Elena, Ben, and little Nora huddled in the corner of the master bedroom. No one spoke. The air was thick with tension, like the house was listening, feeding off their fear. Ben clutched the iron cross to his chest like a lifeline. Daniel held Nora, who had finally stopped crying, but her eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, unblinking, distant. "She's not, right?" Elena whispered. "She hasn't blinked in over an hour." Daniel didn't answer, because he knew something had followed them back. From beneath, suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the first floor, then another. Boom, 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 like a massive fist pounding against the foundation of the house. Then silence. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming up the stairs. But not normal footsteps. These were wet, sticky. Each one sounded like bare skin slapping against wood. Daniel stood and stepped into the hallway, and stopped. At the top of the stairs stood a tall figure, taller than any human, its limbs long and loose like a puppet with broken strings. The same thing he'd seen beyond the front door. Now inside, tilted its head and smiled. Its mouth opened wide, and from inside its throat came a chorus of voices, hundreds, maybe thousands, all layered on top of each other. "She's ours now. You all are." The walls rippled. The hallway bent. Physically bent, like the house was reshaping itself to trap them. Doors slammed shut behind Daniel. He turned to run back into the bedroom, but the door was gone. In its place was only a smooth wall. Ben screamed from inside. Elena cried out. Nora let out a strange, mechanical laugh. The house had separated them. Daniel pounded the wall with his fists. "Let me back in." And from the wall came the voice of the house, soft and cruel. "You entered through the door. You'll leave through the floor." Then the boards beneath Daniel's feet gave way, and he fell. Daniel landed hard on cold stone. He groaned, disoriented, pain lancing through his ribs. The air was thick, hot, reeking of mold, copper, and something worse. He was back in the chamber beneath the house. But it had changed. Now the walls pulsed like the inside of a living organism. Thick black veins crawled across every surface, and from the center of the room rose a new altar, this one taller, built from the bones of people Daniel recognized. A rib here, a jawbone there. Faces were still attached to some of the skulls. One was his. Daniel stumbled backward, clutching his head, screaming, "This isn't real. This isn't real." A voice answered. Not the deep, booming one from before, but a calm, childlike whisper. We never wanted you. From the shadows, the little girl emerged again. Her skin gray, eyes hollow, limbs stiff and twitching like a broken marionette. She pointed past him. Daniel turned. Behind him stood himself, but not alive. His own corpse, mouth gaping, throat split wide open as if something had climbed out from inside. The voice continued, "You brought us back. You opened the door. Now the hollow has you." Suddenly, fire erupted along the blood symbols on the walls, spiraling around him, searing through the air. From every crevice, hands reached out, grasping, pulling, clawing toward him. The faces in the stone screamed, and then everything stopped. Silence. Daniel opened his eyes. He was standing in the living room. Daylight poured through the windows. Elena sat on the couch, holding Nora, who giggled softly. Ben stood by the window, drawing with a pencil, humming to himself. It was like nothing had ever happened. What? Daniel stepped forward. How did we? Elena looked up at him and smiled. But it was wrong. Her eyes were too wide, her mouth too stretched. Nora looked at him and didn't blink. Ben turned around slowly. The picture he had drawn wasn't a house. It was a coffin, with 4 stick figures inside. And above it, he had written in crooked letters, "We never left." Daniel turned toward the window. Outside, the world was gone. Only fog. Only the house. The hollow house. Trapped forever. The family's screams were never heard again. But sometimes, on foggy nights, drivers passing near Wrenmoor Hill swear they see a warm light in the upstairs window. And if you listen closely, you'll hear a child laughing, and then whispering, "Come see the house. We saved you a room."